Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, daily newspaper analysis. Today is 23rd January 2026, and today we are going to have some very important topics from different newspapers. So we'll be discussing these topics. The first one is Asia Pacific on track towards elimination of malaria by 2030. We'll be understanding about malaria as a disease and its characteristics, so everything. And then we'll also look into BRICS India Summit needs a green and a resilient agenda. And then we also talk about the Great Nicobar Infrastructure Development Project, where tribal people from the Andaman and Nicobar Islands will be displaced because of this project. And we'll also understand about this Board of Peace in Gaza and India's absence in this Board of Peace for Gaza. So let's understand these topics in detail. The first one is about Asia Pacific. Is Asia Pacific on track towards elimination of malaria by 2030? Now, a very important report has been published recently, which is World Malaria Report of 2025. Now, this World Malaria Report of 2025 has actually presented the important picture of malaria and the success of Asia Pacific countries when it comes to eliminating malaria. So, however, this report has actually presented mixed signals, particularly for this Asia Pacific region. So, this mixed report or the mixed signals from this Asia Pacific region with respect to malaria elimination, showing that there is a decline in the malaria cases in recent times, but along with that, there is a rising artemisinin resistance. Now, what exactly is this artemisinin resistance? Now, understand that in order to fight malaria, a drug has been developed. The drug name is artemisinin. So this is the drug. However, in recent times, the pathogen actually developing resistance to this anti-malaria drug as well. So that is particularly concerning. And apart from that, in order to fight malaria, it is very important to mobilize global funding so that this global funding can be used to fight malaria, particularly in poor and underdeveloped countries. So if you look at this mixed signals, on the one side there is a declining number of malaria cases. This is the first one. And on the other hand, there is rising resistance to this malaria drug, and the third one is shrinking global financing to malaria. So therefore you could see that there are mixed signals in this. So, however, from this report, World Malaria Report of 2025, there have been several doubts over achieving the target of eliminating malaria by 2030. Understand that this is a UN target to eliminate malaria by 2030. So, from this report, so there are doubts that can we really eliminate malaria by 2030, particularly in those countries where there is a high burden and even the last mile settings. So we need to look at the countries which are poor countries, underdeveloped countries, developing countries where the malaria burden is very high. So from the report and from the mixed signals that we get from this particular report, can we really eliminate malaria by 2030? Because that is the time period to which we have set an objective. So let's understand what exactly is malaria and what are the risks associated with the malaria disease. Now understand that malaria is a very serious life-threatening disease, right? So in fact, it is caused by a Plasmodium parasite. So it is actually transmitted through the bites of an infected female Anopheles mosquito. Now this is very important here that so mosquito is actually a host and it transmits the disease from one individual to another individual. So it could be vector, right? So it transmits a disease from one person to another person, and malaria is actually caused by a parasite called Plasmodium, right? So understand that malaria is not contagious disease. Contagious in the sense that it will not spread from one person to another person, but mosquito actually act as a vector which could actually transmit the disease from one person to another person. right? So however, malaria can spread through infected blood or contaminated needles, so therefore this is a cause of concern. This is the other way that malaria can also spread from one person to another person, right? So however, the most dangerous species are Plasmodium falciparum and Plasmodium vivax. So these are the most dangerous parasites which might cause malaria in human beings. Now, what are the major risks if any person is infected with the malaria? If we talk about the major risks could be, fever, chills, headache. However, it takes around 10 to 15 days to develop the symptoms once a person gets infected with this malaria. However, the serious symptoms because of this malaria disease include seizures, difficulty in breathing, jaundice, dark urine, and even death also if not properly treated. So that is the concern here. And the other concern is that even if we have anti-malaria drugs, those drugs, the parasites have been developing resistance, and that is the cause of concern. If the parasite developing resistance to anti-malarial drugs, then the mortality rate because of the malaria might increase as well. And those countries which are poor, underdeveloped, the vulnerability may increase as well. However, partial immunity can develop in endemic regions, making diagnosis difficult in some patients as well. Now, endemic regions are those regions where a malaria is prevalent. In those areas, if partial immunity is developed against this malaria disease, then it will be very difficult to detect the disease. If we don't detect the disease, the person still have the malaria, but it is difficult to get the symptoms out, or if it is difficult to make the diagnosis, and that further increases the risk as well, right? So therefore, we have to understand that there are symptoms as well, and 247 million new malaria cases were registered in 2021. So 247 million is not a small number. And apart from that, most of this burden is in Africa, Latin America, Asia Pacific, developing, underdeveloped countries only. And 95% of malaria cases in African region, and 6,19,000 malaria related deaths were in 2021, right? So this is the overall picture about the malaria. So let's understand the regional progress and the positive trends when it comes to dealing with malaria disease. Now understand that Asia Pacific as of now recorded a reduction from 9.6 million to 8.9 million cases. So that is actually a success, we can say. But even though this reduction is not a large reduction or a significant reduction, but there is a trend of reduction of this malaria cases thanks to the sustained interventions across the malaria endemic countries to fight against this disease. Now, in fact, within these reductions, there are some countries like Pakistan, Cambodia, Laos, PDR, and Vietnam. So these countries actually reported the major declines of malaria cases, a major reduction of malaria cases. However, some of these countries already achieved the historic lows when it comes to the number of malaria related cases and malaria related deaths. So therefore, the success of these countries in substantially reducing the malaria cases has been highlighting the importance of effective surveillance and even targeted control strategies. However, if you look at the other countries like China, Sri Lanka, and Timor-Leste, so they have successfully demonstrated malaria elimination is achievable through the political commitment, system strengthening, uninterrupted program delivery, increased finances. So all these factors, because whatever measure that these countries have already taken, they are successful and they are promising. So they are promising because of these reasons, including political commitment, system strengthening, uninterrupted program delivery, regular diagnostics, regular monitoring. So these measures can actually yield sustainable results. However, if you look at the Greater Mekong sub-regions containment of antimicrobial resistance, anti-malarial resistance, it actually highlights the value of regional coordination and early warning systems. If you talk about this Greater Mekong sub-region, so it is particularly the East Asian region. right? So East Asian region, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, so those areas. So this greater Mekong sub-region, so it specifically focused on anti-malarial resistance, and it is also successful. So therefore this has been highlighting as a region, a regional coordination is very important among the countries so that they can share best practices among themselves and they can develop the capacities, and at the same time they can actually share their knowledge, their capabilities, everything. So that will actually help fight malaria successfully, and that is evident from this greater Mekong sub-region's containment of this disease, right? So however, there are some facts with respect to malaria given here. For example, India to some extent successful in dealing with malaria cases because there's a 30% reduction in the malaria cases overall in India. Now, apart from that, malaria is accounted for 0.99% of the global malaria deaths. And even India reported 1.4% of total malaria cases in 2022 in the globe. And globally, 5 million additional malaria cases were recorded in 2022, taking total to 249 million as well. However, if you look at all the countries, malaria is highest malaria burden state with 26.8% of the global cases, right? So these are some facts with respect to the malaria disease. So let's understand India's elimination ambition and opportunities and risks with respect to dealing with malaria. Now understand at the global level there is a target to eliminate malaria by the year 2030. However, India is aiming at a zero indigenous malaria cases by the year 2027, just 3 years ahead of the global target. Right. So however, can India achieve this target by 2027? Yes, there is a scope and potential as well. If India is on the right track, we could be able to eliminate this indigenous malaria cases by the year 2027, just 3 years before the 2030. Now also understand that UN Agenda of Sustainable Development Goals, that it also aims at achieving all SDGs by the year 2030. So therefore, this malaria elimination target is also aligned with UN SDG target. Now, since 2015, India has actually achieved a steep reduction in the malaria cases and malaria deaths. Now, in India, there are number of states where, or number of districts which are actually sustaining zero transmission for consecutive years over a period of time. That is actually a massive success in India, particularly a country with a huge population and at the same time inadequate healthcare infrastructure. Districts sustaining this zero transmission for consecutive years is a success. However, if you look at the recent data about these cases, so recent data has also been showing us the plateauing progress, flattening progress and localized rebounds, and even indicating India is off the ideal elimination trajectory. So that means, so we are not able to further reduce the malaria cases, and that is the cause of concern here. And in some areas there is a rebound of these malaria cases, and that has been indicating us that India is off the track when it comes to achieving the malaria elimination target by the year 2027. However, there are 5 states and Northeast, they are actually account for 80% of the malaria burden, and these states, including the Northeast, it is being called as the hotspot of India's malaria burden. So therefore, there is a need for a sharply focused intervention, particularly in these 5 states, including the northeastern part of India, right? So however, in order to act swiftly on this, there are a number of interventions. There needs to be a political commitment, there needs to be increased financing, increased interventions, diagnosis has to be done at the regular level, and at the same time regular support has to be provided as well. Now if you look at the malaria success stories in India, Jorhat, Assam, the tea garden communities leveraged tech and social media to reduce the cases, and Kurukshetra, Haryana is a success story, Odisha is a success story, and Northeast India, some places it is a success story. So how they have achieved this success? Through following or adopting the best practices, and these best practices have to be emulated in other parts of India as well in order to successfully eliminate the malaria and at the same time to achieve the target by the year 2027. However, there is a need for three different shifts which are actually required for elimination of malaria completely from India. So for example, if you look at India, how can we deal with malaria and how can particularly focus on these hotspots? Right. So with India's case, we need a real-time, a case-based surveillance integrating the private sector. Why don't we integrate the private sector as well? And there is a need for a case-based surveillance. There is a need for identifying potential hotspots where there is a highest burden of malaria. Now, high burden states need project mode execution. So there is a need for a project mode execution in high burden states, right? And the government should also invest aggressively to prevent resurgence of malaria. Right? So in fact, the malaria elimination must be treated as a time-bound national mission because we have a target to achieve it by 2027. So therefore, it must be a time-bound national mission with clear accountability, financing, continuity, and outcome monitoring as well. And even community participation is also very important to eliminate malaria in India by 2027. However, the last mile connectivity is also very, very important when we planned to successfully eliminate malaria cases, right? So not merely a policy intent is required, but a last mile delivery is required with aggregate funding commitments from the government. So health systems must synchronize surveillance, treatment and vector control, and even migration tracking for rapid containment. So all these measures must be undertaken to successfully prevent the spread of malaria disease. You could see here as well. Now, in 1947, there are 8 lakh malaria related deaths when India got independence. So there were 8 lakh malaria deaths, and this number has been reduced to 83 deaths in 2023. So therefore, this is a success. And the focus should be on further reducing the malaria related deaths and zero malaria cases in India. So very soon. So if these measures are actually adopted at different levels, particularly in those states where there is a highest burden of these malaria cases. Right. So next important topic is about BRICS India Summit, and India is going to host the next BRICS Summit. So therefore, in this context, so a green and resilient agenda should be adopted by the BRICS, and this could be an opportunity for India and BRICS countries to take up this climate leadership. So in this context, let's understand this in detail. So what exactly is the context? The context is that India is going to host the next BRICS Summit, and India offers a critical opportunity to align national priorities with the urgent needs of the global south. Right. So understand that the global south is a region, is the vulnerable region for the climate change. So therefore, this could be an opportunity for India because India is going to host the BRICS Summit. So India can actually align the national priorities with the urgent needs of the global south through this climate agenda. And also understand that India successfully organized the G20 summit in the year 2023. And apart from that, India is already having the necessary infrastructure and even diplomatic capacity which is required to organize this BRICS summit as well. And apart from that, India can also make this BRICS summit adopt an agenda of green and resilient agenda. Right. So in fact, the growing climate crisis, we all knew about that, how climate change, global warming is a concern and how it has been driving disasters, particularly for countries in the global south. So in this context, resilience is very important. The resilience means actually the country's ability to withstand the negative effect of the climate change. So that resilience must be developed. Right. So the need for enhanced resilience among all the countries, particularly among the BRICS countries, is very important because most of these countries are developing countries and they face highest threat because of the climate crisis. So therefore, this could be a unifying and strategic agenda that could be adopted by these BRICS countries, particularly these developing countries which are disproportionately affected by the climate change and global warming. So let's understand briefly the global context of the leadership the global context of the climate governance or leadership vacuum in the climate governance. Now, let's first understand that global multilateralism. So, if you look at the multilateralism, multilateral institutions, there is a severe strain amid heightened geopolitical polarization. So, geopolitical polarization in the sense that now you could see here that NATO is, threatened by Trump actions to capture Greenland. There are divisions within NATO groups. There are divisions within the transatlantic region. And apart from that, because of this Russia Ukraine war and several other geopolitical reasons, there is actually a geopolitical polarization that you could actually see. So, for example, US under Trump, so it has a deprioritized the climate action. So, for US, climate action is not a priority. And US under Trump is also promoting the increased use of fossil fuels. We also knew that the negative effect of fossil fuels, how they can actually create or trigger global warming and climate change. And in fact, US has also already withdrawn from the multiple international initiatives. So therefore, this retreat from the US has weakened the global momentum on sustainability. Especially, the US has distanced itself from the climate forums and even the institutions central to the collective action. So, US distancing itself from these climate initiatives, climate action, so it actually created a global vacuum along with the geopolitical polarization. And apart from that, if you look at the Europe, these European countries previously positioned as themselves as climate leaders, but this was their previous position, but they are now experiencing the domestic fatigue and shifting their attention towards the security and the economic concerns, not the climate concern. So climate is now not actually a priority for them. Now, within this context, BRICS has potential to emerge as a stabilizing platform which is capable of further sustaining the cooperation on climate action and development oriented responses as well. Right. Now, in this context, BRICS as a platform for collective climate action, and BRICS is actually having that potential. Right. In fact, the Western countries actually looking at BRICS with a suspicion. Right. So they are being viewed with a suspicion, particularly US and even European countries. Because India's diplomatic strength lies in its ability to balance the competing interests between, both blocks, BRICS and even the Western bloc as well, right? Right. So therefore, India needs to balance the competing interests between the West and also Russia and China. So its performance during the G20 summit. So India actually during the G20 summit has balanced this competing interests between the West and the Russia, or between West and the East or global South. So India has actually demonstrated that capacity to navigate the complex geopolitics while preserving strategic autonomy through multi-alignment. A similar approach at the BRICS summit can advance climate cooperation without undermining the crucial bilateral relations. So therefore, this could be an opportunity for India to balance again, right? So balance again in the sense that, so dealing with the climate change and developing resilience is a priority for countries in a global south. So why? Because countries in the global south are mostly vulnerable to climate change, and even developing countries, it is a priority. So we have to understand one thing, that as of now there is a vacuum at the global level. in climate leadership. Climate leadership. So India has the opportunity, along with other BRICS countries, to fill this a vacuum for the climate leadership and take up initiatives to counter climate change, to take up initiatives which could actually address the climate change, global warming, adaptation, mitigation, developing resilience. So all these areas India can actually focus on along with the other BRICS countries, and the next BRICS summit will actually provide India an opportunity to do so. Right? So climate change can affect all other countries irrespective of the borders, irrespective of your developmental status. It affects everything, but it affects the developing countries, underdeveloped countries in the global south the worst. So therefore, these include risks to infrastructure, public health, ecosystems, and livelihoods across the varied geographies as well. Therefore, the sustainable development should be the priority for the countries. Now, in this context, if you look at India's strategic and geopolitical opportunity for through the ongoing BRICS summit. So, as of now, a BRICS is called as BRICS Plus. So, it is called as BRICS Plus because around six new countries became part of the BRICS grouping, along with Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. There are other countries as well which became part of the BRICS grouping. For example, UAE is now a BRICS member. Saudi Arabia is now a member of BRICS grouping. Iran is a member. Ethiopia Ethiopia is also a member. Egypt is also a member. And Indonesia also joined it. So therefore, now BRICS is called as BRICS Plus because a new member, six new countries are actually joined part of the BRICS group. So therefore, BRICS actually represents a significant share in the global population, economic output, and even trade flows. For example, India is a country with the world's largest population. So now India is also going to be the chair of the next BRICS summit that is going to be held in India this year. So India is positioned to shape a collective agenda that could actually prioritizes climate resilience and inclusive growth. So inclusive growth, a growth which in which no one is left behind, a growth in which everyone have the opportunities to develop. That is inclusive growth. And climate resilience means that the ability of the countries to withstand the negative effect of climate change is climate resilience. So therefore, this is an opportunity for India to prioritize both inclusive growth and climate resilience. So such a leadership from Indian side would reinforce India's global standing while addressing the pressing vulnerabilities of developing nations. So geopolitically, a strong BRICS-led initiative also serves a balance competing the ambitions, particularly those of China, in shaping the global climate leadership. Right? So, therefore, in this context, it is true that India, along with other BRICS countries, they actually have the opportunity to shape the global climate leadership and at the same time address some of the issues which are affecting the developing countries, underdeveloped countries, and these countries can actually discuss, deliberate on the policies and initiatives which help address climate change and help these countries develop collective resilience and also results in inclusive growth and development among these countries, particularly the global south. Now, India is called as the leader of the global south because of its inherent history, or because of its past track record. India is considered as a leader of the global south. So therefore, this is the opportunity for India to shape this a global climate initiative or global climate leadership. So the next important topic is about official coercion tribals in Nicobar Island to surrender land. So understand here is that in Andaman Nicobar Islands, so Andaman and Nicobar Islands are strategically a very important island group. right? So this Andaman and Nicobar Islands are located in the Indian Ocean, very close to Strait of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca is known as one of the most important choking points. So therefore, since it is located very close to the Strait of Malacca, and apart from that, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands are also very close to the South China Sea, and then growing importance for the Indo-Pacific region and the need for ensuring free, open, rules-based Indo-Pacific and growing Chinese naval presence. So this is also a concern, right? So growing Chinese naval presence in the Indian Ocean region. And apart from that, we should also understand that Southeast Asia, Southeast Asia and East Asia are a very important economies, supply chain resilience, and then the need for developing Andaman and Nicobar Islands, collective development or inclusive development of Andaman and Nicobar Islands. All these things necessitated India to focus on Andaman and Nicobar Islands development as a strategic base. Now, in this context, the government announced the Great Nicobar Mega Infrastructure Development Project. So understand that in order to fulfill all these above mentioned objectives, the government has mentioned Great Nicobar Mega Infrastructure Development Project. Now, what is the concern with this Mega Infrastructure Development Project? The concerns are, so Andaman and Nicobar Island is a fragile area. So it is an eco-sensitive area. It is known for endemic species, those species which only found in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And it is a biodiversity rich area. And this area is also known for some of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Right? So therefore, keeping in mind the importance of the fragile nature of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, eco-sensitive nature of it, and endemic species, biodiversity rich area, and it is also home to particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Now, if this Great Nicobar Mega Infrastructure Development Project is carried out, then it leads to cutting down forests or large scale deforestation. And we know the consequences of deforestation. The fragile nature of Andaman and Nicobar Islands will be destroyed because of deforestation, and the eco-sensitive nature and the endemic species will be in danger. Biodiversity can be lost, and the tribals will be displaced from their ancestral lands. So since the government is going to take up this Great Nicobar Mega Infrastructure Development Project, officials are forcing the local tribals to surrender their land rights. And officials are also asking the tribals to sign the surrender certificate. Surrender certificate. The surrender certificate particularly to surrender their lands, ancestral lands. So on those lands, these people have been living since generations. However, this amounts to the displacement of the tribal people, displacement of the local tribal people. However, if local tribal people are displaced, they might lose their land rights. Now, displaced people, it is very important that there needs to be a proper rehabilitation and resettlement. Rehabilitation and resettlement. But here the problem is that once the government is displacing the tribal communities, the government is going ahead with these projects, but the government is not actually focusing on rehabilitation and resettlement, and that's why the tribal communities who are going to be displaced, who are Nicobar tribal Nicobaris, right? So Nicobaris tribal group, they are going to be displaced by this Great Nicobar Mega Infrastructure Development Project. And also understand that this Great Nicobar Mega Infrastructure Development Project is going to be taken up in the Little Nicobar and the Great Nicobar Islands of Nicobar Island. Little Nicobar and Great Nicobar Islands. So because of that reason, the Nicobaris tribal groups are going to be displaced and they are going to surrender their ancestral land rights. So this is a cause of concern for them, right? So apart from that, Shompen tribe. The Shompen tribe is also a very important tribe. They are going to be displaced as well, right? So this is actually the main concern, and other details with respect to this displacement and species which are being threatened are actually given here. So you could actually go through this as well. Right. So if you look at the tribal groups which are living in the Andaman and Nicobar group of island, Nicobaris, Jarevas, Shompens, Onges, Andamanis, and Sentinelese. Now, because of this Great Nicobar Infrastructure Development Project, Nicobaris tribal group and Shompens are going to be displaced. Now, here Shompens are one of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So, therefore, this is a cause of concern as well. Now, next important topic is India is absent as Trump rolls out his board of peace. Now, earlier we have discussed about Trump's board of peace for Gaza. Now, as part of this board of peace for Gaza, earlier Trump has announced a 20-point peace plan to achieve an agreement between Hamas and Israel so that there will be a peace, a ceasefire in this Hamas-Israel conflict. Now, as part of this 20-point peace plan between Israel and Hamas, Trump announced a board of peace for Gaza, and Trump has also invited India. Now, yesterday, Mr. Trump signed this declaration of board of peace in Gaza. So, with the signing of this declaration, this agreement coming into force. However, around 19 countries actually participated in this board of peace for Gaza initiative along with Trump. However, despite India receiving an invitation from Trump, so India did not become part of it. However, those countries who become part of the board of peace for Gaza, they need to pay $100 billion, 1 billion US dollars. They need to pay 1 billion US dollars, not 1 billion US dollars. They need to pay to become part of his board of peace. However, he also invited China, he also invited Russia, and he also invited several European allies. Nobody is part of it. France not part of it, UK, and several other countries, even Canada did not part of it, did not become part of it. And Russia, China are also not part of it, and India is also not participated in it. But yesterday he signed this agreement, and with the signing of this agreement, it is coming into effect. So let's understand the structure of Board of Peace that US President Donald Trump has created. So in which context he has created this? Proposed by Donald Trump as part of 20-point Gaza peace plan with the broader ambitions for global conflict management. Right. Now, what is the purpose of this Board of Peace? The purpose is implementing US brokered Gaza peace plan. And this Board of Peace will oversee the reconstruction and the government transition over a period of time in Palestine. Secondly, it is also having the broader ambition that if it is successful, then it will be further extended to the other conflicts around the world to address the global conflicts outside the traditional forums. What is the key goal here? The key goal is provide strategic oversight, mobilize resources, and ensuring accountability. Then, if we talk about the origin of it, so US initiative partly endorsed by UNSC resolution of 2803. Right. So what is the structure of this board of peace? The structure of board of peace, it has the chairman, and the chairman is the current president Donald Trump, and he's going to be the permanent chairman of this board of peace, whether he is a president or not. Right. So apart from that, he's having the executive board as well. So executive board is the core decision making body, and these are the members of the executive board of this board of peace. So the membership model, so invitation only, right? So not everybody can become part of this board of peace. It is based on invitation, and those who pay $1 billion, then they can become members of this board of peace. So board of peace. Right. Now in this context, you could also go through the key executive members of this executive board. Right. So what are the arguments for rivalry? What are the arguments against? For example, Trump known criticism of UN efficiency, UN funding. Since UN is not efficient, then why don't we have a board of peace as an alternative to it? And exclusive US led versus UN's universal collective nature, because UN is a multilateral and universal body. It is not dominated by one single country, but this board of peace is a US led initiative, and it is dominated by US. And in fact, it also has the potential to bypass UNSC on war peace issues. There are concerns about the parallel structure sidelining the UN agencies. And in fact, it is also perceived as a neo-imperialist colonial by the critics. Right? So, however, US has been claiming that it's not to replace but galvanize UN or reform UN or to increase the importance of UN. Right? So apart from that, it also includes some former and current UN figures, and it initially focused on Gaza and wider mandate in case if this board of peace for Gaza is successful. So this is the structure of UN. Right? So I hope you have understood the board of peace, and thank you so much. So please subscribe our YouTube channel and also like a video. Thank you.